Neil Derrick. Mr. Neil Derrick just joined us as well. Neil, if you could. Your microphone, I think, is a bit too close to
the micro.
Yeah, your
it's
audio
okay.
is quite loud.
It's okay.
Can you just say a couple of words to see if it's better?
Okay.
Yeah, your audio quality is not very good. Maybe if you can move your microphone a bit further away.
Yes.
Now it's better.
So now?
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, thanks.
And then we also, I saw Mr. Anirban Ghosh joined us as well normally. I don't see him now anymore. And then we're also waiting for Danny McCoy from our Irish employers organization. But we should start now because the time.
Okay, we start now. Thank you all of you for joining. Thank you, ILO, Martha. Thank you, UNEP, Joy, for joining us in this effort. And I thank also to all the participants, but companies and business organizations that are joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be with us, with you. It's a real pleasure also to have a kind of joint event in which we want to have some takeaways, because that's the real driver of this conversation, is how we can commit further in a scenario which is very difficult, which is, socially speaking, one of the worst scenarios that we have seen since the Second World War, but also which have some important challenges and opportunities. We are keeping and saying we need to build back better, but at the end of the day, what we need is the specific action, the specific recommendations, the specific guidance on how to do that. And never before efficient partnership, efficient identification of actions have been so important. And that's why we are here today. Let me just go very quickly with some points that I think are relevant also to put us in the context, in the context we have. On one side, we have a huge employment challenge. The employment challenges was before the pandemic already. Remember that for achieving the SDG 8, we need to create over 600 million new jobs before 2030. But right now, as a consequence of the pandemic, what we are witnessing, and this is data that we have been identifying from an ILO survey, 40% of companies are reporting in not having access to any funding or any support for their survival and for their recovery, which means also job losses. We are learning a very important lesson, and is that rapid adaptation, rapid mitigation is critical. The quicker we are, the best we will be placed. But we are far away from being sure that that will be the case to face this global crisis. Behaviors, attitudes, business models also matter more than ever to change quickly and to have a strong action and strong impulses. We in IOE always say we are the largest private sector network in the world. We were created 100 years ago. And it's not just the 50 million companies that we represent. More important is the fact that our business and employees organizations are the ones being consulted on a regular manner by governments. They are the ones that have an influence to shape policies. And that's what we can add as a value in this action, is the fact that we can, and we have proved, build together on policy action, on implementation policies, which will make a difference. We are also witnessing in many countries, not in I would say in all of them, action to recovery, stimulus action, stimulus packages that have been launched. There is a figure which is the $12 trillion worldwide that have been put precisely to help companies in their, and also workers, and also the economy in general, to adapt and protect economic and social actors. We have to see that as a unique opportunity to build in a different manner. Where we have not been doing well, first of all, we have been insisting in IOE that all the informal sector, the fact that 60% of the occupied population is in the formal sector, in many economies, this represents more than 70 or 80%, and also a big percentage of their economies is a challenge to the environment, it's a challenge to the need to anticipate climate change. And as far as we are not efficient, as far as we are not really doing better on how we tackle this big problem, we will not be able also to recover in a manner that has really the capacity to leave us to a different scenario. As business organizations, we insist very much that entrepreneurship, company environment, business environment is totally and closely linked to innovation and creativeness. Innovation and creativeness is more needed than ever also to build back differently and also to anticipate the important consequences that we'll have to face vis-a-vis the climate change action that will need to be put into place. I want to remind an important known forecast. If we would fail to achieve the Paris temperature goals, countries stand to lose up to 600 trillion by the century's end. Financial decisions made over the next 12 months and those already in place will shape the global economy for the next decade. So the decisions that we are taking now, the decisions that we are able to put in place will really make a difference for the coming, not 2 or 3 years, but for the coming decade. If we are really serious in the way we promote new ways to phase out the traditional energy source for the new ones, renewables ones, with the proper stimulus, proper investment, we will be making the right choice. At the end of the day, what is at stake is jobs. There is a forecast of 100 million jobs, which are conditional to proper sustainability, circular economy scenario. But this conditionality is also linked to an area which is very often forgotten, is skills, is training, is the just transition angle. And that's where the ILO also is playing an important role also with us. And we hope also that we'll have a good partnership with UNEP. If we do not have the skills that are necessary to change and to have commitments in the energy, in the agricultural, in the waste, in the manufacturing, in the transport, in the tourism sector, we will not get there. We are very concerned and very worried that less than 40% of the NDCs, the national determined contributions, just less than 40% include any plan for skills training. And that's not really the best way also to promote these just transitions. And over 20% of them do not plan any human capital related activities at all. To reach the net zero emissions by 2050, annual clean energy investment worldwide will need to be more than triple by 2030 to around 4 trillion. Let's look at the future. Let's look at the policy attention that we need to address the employment also losses and the employment restructuring and to minimize these disruptions. Smooth transitions also need social protection schemes that are efficient. We are now discussing in the ILO, in the International Labour Conference, how to build differently on social protection. So we have to have an engagement of business and employers, but also of workers' organizations and governments to have this efficiency to promote transition much more deeply rooted in our culture. That's not the case. That's far been the case in many countries. At the end of the day, also, from all this will depend the incomes many persons, many individuals are currently having or will have in the future. We need structural reforms, we need new source of revenues, but also we need proper incentives, proper support for workers and for business to build differently. We very often see and witness excessive taxation, some burdensome administrative requirements, lack of coordination among institutions, corruption, etc. We need also to tackle that in a productive manner. If certain industries or sectors are being phased out, those losses need to be absorbed by urgent support measures. Livelihoods, business continuity need to be ensured as a first priority. So let's work all together with this idea of, on one side, assuring a resilient, more stable recovery, but on the other side, bearing in mind that we need also to have a kind of oxygen on innovation and creativity through also releasing angle. Thank you again for joining us. And now we would like also to hear the other partners that we are gathering with, their views, their perspectives, so that we can start identifying the way forward. Thank you very much for the attention that you have paid to me. So now I think I can see, yes, Joyce, is your turn. Thank you very much for joining us. Happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and greetings, colleagues and distinguished speakers. Let me start by first expressing on behalf of UNEP my heartfelt thanks to IOE and ILO, our partners, for inviting UNEP to speak at this important event. It is very clear that some of the transformations that the global environment outlook calls for will affect workers around the world. And so today's discussion is very, very timely. I'm so excited to see the diverse list of participants connected online. Your presence is a cause of great hope. It's another sign that the business community has begun to wake up to the existential threat of today's planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, chemicals, and pollution. These crises pose to businesses everywhere. It is a sign that some of our economy's most powerful actors, you, understand the urgent change that is needed. This is good news because the scale of the threat is unlike anything humankind has ever experienced. The stability that has allowed humankind to prosper for thousands of years is being severely disrupted. There is now more carbon in the atmosphere than at any time in the last 2 to 3 million years. Our hotter planet is supercharging hurricanes and intensifying droughts. It's triggering massive floods that are forcing millions of people from their homes. And this is only the beginning. Climate change has far worse in store. As if this was not enough, humans are also destroying the living world. Massive swathes of forest are disappearing at an alarming rate. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. Air pollution and plastic choke air and waterways. The extinction of plants and animal species is happening 1,000 times faster than the natural rate. The reason this matters is that a stable climate and a healthy living world lie at the very foundation of human well-being. Without the rich diversity and abundance of life, the human species simply cannot flourish or prosper. And this is as true for businesses as it is for anything else. Business success depends on healthy people, resilient societies, productive natural systems, and a stable climate. Every single one of these is under threat. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it is that business as usual will no longer work. So how did we get here? At the heart of the problem is our economic system. We have known for decades that material, linear, fossil fuel-based economic growth is driving the crisis, but we have failed to change the course. Instead, businesses and governments have simply doubled down on the status quo. We fixate on short-term gains. We use economic growth as a synonym for human progress. And we do so even when this harms humanity's collective well-being. Never before have we needed to change so much in such a short time. If we want to prevent economic, ecological, and social decline, then we must build an economy where we generate and consume within planetary limits. That is regenerative and collaborative, an economy where growth is only valued if it contributes to social progress and environmental protection. This new economy is not dependent on fossil fuels or over extracting resources or exploiting people to create value. It is an economy that places human well-being at the very heart of everything it does. It is an economy that serves everyone, not the other way around. And tragic as it may seem, the unprecedented stimulus and recovery packages that are being invested to kickstart our economies can no longer invest in the toxic and gray economy that brought us where we are today. And Roberto spoke to that eloquently. This is where businesses like yours play such a vital role. CEOs and entrepreneurs have the power to steer the economy towards a new model of prosperity, and one which also considers the impact on their workers. This is tremendous opportunity for those who take up this challenge, who dare to explore, to experiment, and to collaborate. But, and I want to be very clear here, for businesses who fail to transform, only disaster lies ahead. There is a Kiswahili proverb, aliyekando haangukiwi na mti. A tree does not fall upon someone who stands aside. The climate crisis and the unraveling of the living world is the falling tree. And businesses that fail to get out of the way will be crushed. As these systemic risks disrupt the marketplace, companies that fail to adapt will find it impossible to attract finance, talent, and customers. With so much at stake, clinging to business as usual is not just risky, but irresponsible. So what can businesses do? The Geo for Business brief that we are discussing today provides some answers. It serves as a guide for businesses that are smart enough to embark on individual and collective journeys of transformation. Many firms have already set off on this journey, sparking massive change in their sectors. The huge disruption in energy markets is the clearest example. But similar transformations are afoot in food, mobility, fashion, and resource use as companies switch to secular business models that eliminate waste and protect the natural world. But living in unprecedented times means moving with unprecedented speed. We can and must seize this momentum and mobilize public investments to stimulate this transformation. Business leaders who work to bring about this nature positive world and whose businesses thrive as a result will be hailed as the pioneers of the new economy. I hope all of us here today can work together to drive the change that we so desperately need. Thank you very much.
Joyce, powerful messages. We cannot agree more on this need for a new and different leadership also to change the scenario. Let's move also to Martha. Martha, ILO has also been very active, also engaging us also in this path. So thank you again for joining us.
Oh, no, thank you so much, Roberto, and thank you for convening this important discussion and the panels today. And also particularly, Joyce, it's just so great to have this conversation with UNEP, the ILO, and the IOE all together about the role of business in building back better and greener from the pandemic. You know, the health crisis and COVID-19 still has a tight grip on our lives and on our economies around the world, and governments, employers, and organizations and labor unions are working fiercely to soften the blow of COVID restrictions worldwide. But you know, we know for sure that the world is going to look very different after COVID-19, and especially the world of work, as we've seen the acceleration of so many important topics for example, Roberto's just alluded to the importance of skills, of upskilling and reskilling, and other active labor market policies that must address more broadly the gaps and shortages that the world of work is facing. And it's important as we're planning, we say build back better, but I would say to build forward better. We cannot afford to lose more progress towards sustainable development. We have 93% of the world's employees have seen their workplace close down either permanently or temporarily during the pandemic. And this affects millions of workers and their families, as well as business owners across the world. The impact of business couldn't be more profound. The ILO, we've been working closely with the IOE and your member companies throughout the pandemic. And we've seen that some 85% of companies that the ILO has surveyed reported that COVID-19 had a high or medium level impact, financial impact on their businesses. I mean, 85%. So more broadly, the challenges for business, whether it's increased unemployment, the losses in labor market, labor and business income, enterprise closures, and new challenges that you all are having to deal with daily on dealing with occupational safety and health and rights at work. There's so much on the plate right now. So as we've been, just thinking more broadly about these challenges, we've got to work together to assist employers that just have faced such staggering impact. And we know that the pandemic has affected us all, but we're learning more about the fact that it doesn't affect us all equally. We know that youth, marginalized communities, the poor, indigenous populations around the world are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And when it comes to women, I mean, the impact of the pandemic has a female face. Women have suffered disproportionate job and income losses and make up the majority of workers in some of the hardest hit sectors, frontline workers who are also handling the majority of caregiving. And this just underscores the need for a gender responsive recovery as we look more broadly at these issues. So, we've been thinking very thoughtfully about the recovery, working very closely with our colleagues at IOE, and we want this to be a human-centered recovery. Policies that make a difference for people impacted, whether that's a vulnerable worker in a small community somewhere in the world, or whether it's that business owner that's trying to find their way forward in the recovery in an already challenging path that's been made even more challenging by COVID-19. So we here in the ILO have been promoting a 4-pillar policy framework to ensure a thoughtful recovery based on international labor standards, which can tackle the socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19 crisis. At the beginning, the ILO policies framework focused on supporting business continuity to save as many jobs as possible and to pave the way towards a smoother and quicker recovery by preventing permanent business closures. The first pillar of the 4 highlight the importance of stimulating the economy and employment through active fiscal and monetary policies, as well as securing, as Roberto's already mentioned, the appropriate lending and financial support to targeted sectors that is so critical. And then focusing the second pillar on supporting enterprises, jobs, and incomes by creating this enabling environment for economic growth. Relief packages for enterprises are so critical. The employment retention measures and the importance, again, as Roberto has alluded, of extending social protection for all. And the third pillar, you all are navigating this. So it's taking a lot of companies' times. They're just focusing on the protection of workers in the workplaces during the COVID crisis, as you all were learning and developing your practices, whether that was what teleworking was going to look like, expanding access to paid leave, and just the innovation of how and why we do business. And then lastly, the fourth pillar, which is the cornerstone to the stability of the world of work, and where the IOE is such a critical partner, and that's relying on social dialogue for solutions. You know, the ILO is committed to the strength and the capacity and resilience of our constituents and strengthening the social dialogue process. So, you know, the policy framework has been incredibly useful, and we've been informed constantly with advice and guidance from IOE and our other constituents that will culminate in an important outcome at this year's first virtual ever International Labor Conference, to really emphasize that the continued sense of urgency that a human-centered recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic has to be inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. It's important that recovery plans are not only addressing the socioeconomic challenges aggravated by the pandemic. So we're advocating for a sustainable recovery and a just transition. And a just transition which couples the need for social change and job creation with climate action. So I won't speak. My colleague from UNEP has spoke very articulately about what we're facing, the gravity of climate change, and the environmental challenges that are being faced across the globe. But I want to focus a little on our thinking at the ILO, you know, that we believe that climate action, economic and social development with proper planning and engagement of all stakeholders, importantly business, can go hand in hand. And this belief is founded in data, in our data and our research and experience from our constituents worldwide. You know, our research shows that if we implement the needed measures towards the Paris Agreement on climate change, there could be a potential net job gain of 18 million jobs by 2030. Yes, we know that some jobs will be lost to decarbonization, but globally, we could see an increase of employment and opportunities as a result of climate action. And also that climate action is a solid opportunity for businesses to become more resilient, more productive, and healthier places to work. I believe that climate action presents a unique opportunity to restart and reshape economies, to deliver decent jobs and social justice, and to decouple growth from emissions. But if 18 million jobs are easily achieved under our commitments under the Paris Agreement, why is the ILO and our constituents then advocating for a just transition? So just as we know that the COVID recovery will be uneven throughout the world, we also know that it hits the most vulnerable disproportionately hard, and that certain groups, certain regions, they won't be reaping the employment gains immediately expected from the greening of the economy. So we need to be mindful and strategic when planning for the future, whether it's regional, demographic, or geographical contexts. So that's why it's imperative to put in place timely just transition plans for governments, for employers, for labor unions, to proactively work to maximize climate action and minimize social hazards related to the decarbonization of the economy. And the ILO's guidelines for a just transition towards environmentally sustainable economies and societies for all, which was adopted in 2015, is exactly the framework that many governments, employers, and workers are looking towards when they're planning ahead. Through the NDC partnership, the ILO has worked with governments and social partners to integrate decent work and just transition dimensions in nationally determined contributions, which are crucial in work towards reaching the goals of the Paris Agreement. But why does just transition matter for the private sector? Well, it matters because it's the future of profitability of companies that's at stake. The green transition will be innovative and disruptive in nature, and eventually it's companies' license to operate which is being jeopardized. We've seen great examples of energy companies that have taken social dialogue and just transition into the core of the boardroom and are planning for a just transition together with governments and labor unions to secure the future of the company as well as that of their employees. Business organizations and companies need to engage in the policy debates about what kind of subsidies and incentives are needed. The social protection schemes, as Roberto has alluded to, and as I've also the skilling of the workforce also that we've previously mentioned. Ultimately, these plans and these policies have direct implications for how the business resilience and how to prepare the private sector for the future. So I just want to end by stressing that a green recovery matters for business for several reasons. First, there's evidence, it's clear and simple, that investing in a green recovery can stimulate economic growth and employment creation. Our own studies with the ILO, with our partners, suggest that the investment on the economic recovery for buildings and for renewable energies, efficiency renovations, and green transport could create some 20.5 million additional net jobs by 2030. And that would compare with around 3 million additional jobs in a conventional scenario of the same size, which would be providing a business as usual boost to growth across all sectors through a cut in value-added taxes. Second, by nature, innovation is creative destruction. However, a green transition has the potential to stimulate investment, foster business development, and open up new markets. For example, consider mobility. The UK Cycling Association reported for 2020 a growth of retail sales by 60%, while e-bike sales more than doubled. And similar trends have been recorded in many other countries. And we know that we've seen it here in Geneva. You know, as the ILO guidelines in 2015, just so eloquently state, managed well, the transitions to environmental and socially sustainable economies can become strong drivers of job creation, job upgrading, social justice, and poverty alleviation. But now, with the pandemic, I mean, the sense of urgency is even more relevant. And we need businesses. You all are the drivers of the world of work. We need businesses to continue to play the important role of implementing the just transition strategies and be participatory on the ground. So be proactive, plan ahead, and reach out to the key stakeholders, your employees and your policymakers, and let's work together to plan for a fair and just transition for all. So I just want to thank Roberto for your leadership.
This last message, be proactive. I'm going to use it with a question to Joyce, with your permission, because
yes.
In ILO we are very known and we are very active, we are very engaged. And I know that UNEP is already launching an important initiative with the private sector. We really want to be engaged and to make a difference. How can we do that, Joyce? How can we really, especially bearing in mind that not just our business organization, I'm seeing here now Danny McCoy from IBEC, thank you also for joining us, are from a policy perspective influential, but also they have also a key role on social dialogue, on skills, on employment. So how can we engage with you also, together also with the ILO, but bringing also the change that we need also in terms of policies, and also preserving the business environment that is needed and the stimulus that is needed. I don't know if the question is very, very vague, but any feedback from you would be very much appreciated before we go to the panel, to the next panels, okay?
Thank you. It's a very good question, Roberto. So I will give you 3 very specific ideas on your question, how can business be engaged with UNEP? As you know, we produce science. I mean, we will be discussing Geo for Business. So one is on advocacy, using our science to actually be the cheerleaders out there to highlight some of the good examples that businesses might have linked to the kinds of environmental challenges to influence policies. If you look at most countries globally, businesses do play a central role in job creation. So you do have voices when it comes to politics. So one is advocacy for policy action, but grounded on science, which UNEP produces. The second, we have the United Nations Environment Assembly, where all the ministers of environment usually meet here in Nairobi once every 2 years. And we do have other stakeholders' voices presented in this meeting. So be active, come engage with the ministers and all the policy conversations that are happening as part of UNEP, the UN Environment Assembly. Lastly, we have a platform called Science Policy Business Forum, which is really catering to businesses. And there again, we highlight the innovations, we extract lessons from businesses to help inform policy actions, both at the global, regional, and country level. And I'll be happy to share more information with you, Roberto, and your community on these 3 specific opportunities. Over to you.
Great, great. We will follow up on the 3. Be reassured of that, on the advocacy and science, the Environment Assembly in Kenya, and also in the platform, the business platform. Let's go now to the next speakers. First, we have Aris Vetros. Let me explain that the fact that we have Aris Vetros with us is linked to a report, that has been produced by UNEP. The business author of this, one of the business authors of this report is Vetros, and you are working in the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And we have a very specific question for you. What is your extensive experience working on sustainability and the private sector? I mean, what do you see as the quick and strong point? And how we can create a long-term collaboration based on mutual understanding. Sometimes we have the impression that the communication angle is weak. The language that we speak in international organizations is very different from the language in business. And we are always, employees and business organizations, are trying to overcome this gap. No? And how some of your key insights in driving sustainable change can really make a difference in terms of progress for the challenge objectives that we have in terms of climate change. So what are the key areas? What are the key elements of progress for business to help and support in added value, in really making a difference to achieve the objectives? So the floor is yours, and thank you again for joining us, Aris.
Thank you, Roberto. That's quite a mandate. Thank you everyone to the IOE and the ILO, and of course the team at GEO for having us, and very honored to represent the work that we did in my fellow office.
Sorry to interrupt you. You can talk a little bit lower because we don't hear you well. Okay.
Lower or louder? Louder.
High.
All right. Okay.
Louder.
I'll just bring that. Can you hear me better now? All right. Okay. Thank you. So I won't repeat my thanks. I'll in this sort of I think there are some great points made already, and it's kind of some of them are very relevant to the points that we came to as the group working in that report. Just to say that just to place myself and my institution, CISL, the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, we are 30 years old plus organization working predominantly with business, the investment community, and policy on a transformation agenda. So we've seen a lot of change over the last 3 decades. And I would like to share kind of 3 key messages, if you like, along the lines of the brief, the Adapt to Survive, the business transformation in time of uncertainty that we kind of put together. The first one, which the Deputy Director of UNEP has very kind of eloquently highlighted, is that there are indisputable and unprecedented pressures at the moment. And to your point about language, we have done much better over the last couple of years to bridge the gap between business language and science language. So all those messages are coming across much more loudly and much more evidently, not enough yet, but very much more clearly than they have been in the past. And we are better able to handle some of the challenges. So we know the IEA launched a report a couple of weeks ago. We know that even the climate pledges by governments are insufficient. They're not going to get us to net zero by 2050. So we're no longer overwhelmed by it. We're working productively and proactively and constructively to work out some of the solutions. I guess the pandemic has highlighted the interconnectedness between climate, nature, and people and society in a way that we haven't done before. Now, despite the devastating impacts, I take that as a benefit, as a value. And sort of we now have a much clearer view of the relationship between nature and society and some of the links there. We also see that we now have a convergence between nature and climate space. We're no longer talking about climate change and nature as two very sideload elements. Increasingly, and this concept of nature positive economy, the way we approached it and the way others, like there are a few other reports, are converging. We're talking about a one natural world which has to encompass the society and individuals. And of course, we've highlighted a lot the S, the social, in what we used to call ESG, environment, social, and governance. All those trends, I think, are making a big difference. And so the brief that we've been working on has brought together academia, business, and thought leadership and various experts. And we were looking at really the question that in this time of uncertainty and transformation, business really needs to question some of the thinking in the systems that got us here in the first place. So we're trying to explore some of those challenges, but also those opportunities. And we drew some examples from different sectors, energy, food, and materials, to show that those transitions are happening. They are emerging. There are wonderful examples that show us that we needn't and can no longer rely on the sort of more linear models of growth that we've used to in the past, especially if we want to maximize utility for people, for societies. One of the major failures of the previous model was that seeing the inequality growing in various parts of the world and between countries, it has failed people as well as the environment. So the final point that I want to make and focus on is, in this nature positive economy that works for nature, environment, and people, how does that translate into business? How do we take that language of science and how do we help business engage? And this is at the center of our work here. We recognize that business is core to this transition, to decarbonize the economy, to protect and restore nature, to foster more inclusive and resilient societies. We have many companies that have signed up to science-based targets, many initiatives, CEO voices, and loads of questions now about the role of business in society. At the same time, we have the challenge that we have defined nature positive economy, the circular economy, the net zero economy, but we haven't really said what does a net zero business look like, what does a circular business look like. And of course, we shouldn't forget that business as usual, that old neoclassical consumption-driven model has a strong hold. That business as usual model still has a strong hold on the way we make decisions today. So how can we support and enable organizations and incentivize them to take that forward? So in the brief, we try to take a simple approach, recognizing that different sectors and different companies will develop and grow and take on sustainability in their own pace. And you won't be surprised to hear that we identified 5 or 6 recommendations, but at the core is an understanding of how the business contributes to the world, its impacts, its dependencies on nature and climate and people. The second element that was central to our recommendation was for business leaders to think what that purpose is. What does it mean for the business to create value, and for whom it is expected and required to create value? Do we still maintain shareholder supremacy in this day and age, or has the world changed and requires something different? And finally, a note to business leaders of all sizes, from SMEs and startups to big conglomerates, to be a little brave, to start working, and if it means questioning how we do things and how we define success, because some of the metrics that we use are quite outdated in a way. So how do we move? So if it means questioning some of those core tenets of what we used to know as business success, that's fine. You're not alone. There's many, many organizations and many initiatives, academia, research, leadership, business, across the board, working to define and develop those new ideas in those businesses. So those are the sort of the key points that I wanted to share. And just as a closing note on the business case, because some people always ask, in my experience, I've been working, I lead the Center for Business Transformation here at CSL. I don't know of a single company that has invested wisely in sustainability and has made that at a loss, has not benefited greatly. So I'm very happy to be challenged on that, but in my experience,
okay, that's a challenge. Let's find examples of companies that have invested in sustainability and have had losses. I think that's a provocative question, but it's a good point. And also the point of metrics. I mean, how we measure. I mean, and what kind of indicators we are handling. Thank you for your input, Danny. Thank you also for joining us. It's always an honor to have such an important organization for us as IBEC. I mean, it has been for a long-standing period an active member of IOE, and having you also with us is really an honor. We know that you have a new regulation on climate change. We know also that it's not always easy for a business organization to handle this new regulation, for the practical implications to have for business. We would like to know from your experience, what can you tell us on that? I mean, from both a challenging but realistic manner. I mean, how difficult is it to handle new policies as the ones that you have in place? Thank you.
Roberto, colleagues, thank you for the invitation. And so I'm Danny McCoy, the CEO of IBEC, which is the Irish Business Representative Organization. And I guess if you look at the Irish economy over the last 6 years, the economy, for a number of factors we won't go into today, but basically intellectual property movements, the economy has grown by 100% in 6 years. So that's repeating that 100%. A doubling of economic activity in such a short space of time makes it rather difficult, even with a misalignment between intangible assets driving the economy to tangible assets driving the economy to meet environmental targets from that premise to start with. So that obviously is a backdrop that makes it really difficult. Ari's comments I really liked a lot. My own background is in economics, lecturing in the other place, Ari, in Oxford and at University College London. But one of the features I'd like to say is kind of against myself here, is that the science and business communities, very often the language doesn't translate, nor does the concepts. I had lectured for 15 years talking about carbon taxation and so on. And I recall a meeting in IBEC with the Beers, the Diamonds people, Diamond being carbon, and they changed their name to Element 6. And I said, why did you call yourself Element 6? And they said, because carbon is the 6th element of the periodic table. I had no idea, right? I had been 15 years lecturing on carbon, but I had no idea of where it would appear on a periodic table. Now, that's only a small point of information, but those information gaps can be really difficult. And they can be really difficult to the point that when confronted, directors of boards, when confronted by the environmental challenge, they are not confident enough to say they don't know. And they end up signing up to pledges, but not knowing its full fiduciary problem for the business ultimately. And Roberto, you asked me about Ireland specifically. We have a coalition government of which the Green Party is a very significant member. And therefore, we are seeing new legislation coming in line with the near doubling of ambition within the European Union that will have an element of targets, 51% reduction in all greenhouse gases on 1990 levels by 2030. But this will be done sectorally, and annual budget targets will be put forward. I'm not certain, and I've yet to meet, I meet many businesses every day. I've yet to meet a business that doesn't have a growth ambition. And if you add them all up, it means they all have growth ambitions. And yet the reality, while there's many opportunities in the transition in the environment, the reality in the short term is it's a binding constraint. But nobody thinks the bind is on them because they somehow think the competitors or the other sector will get hit first. So it's a little early in the Irish journey because the legislation has just gone through. We don't know exactly what those annual budgets will be. But sometimes in life, when you make promises and you're not fully sure of what you've committed to, the reaction can be to say, we're going to have to try harder and run faster. If you use the running analogy, we've less time now than we thought we had to 2030. We've doubled the ambition. I said we doubled the amount of economic activity as well. We know what the race is, but if we start off too quickly, we're likely to get a stitch, a pain in our side, and we'll be complaining about the course and the race being too long or not getting enough time to prepare. And so I think that that element of the information and the gap between the science and the business, as people who are leading here, we really have to be sensitive that there is still quite a level of ignorance. I don't mean that in an offensive way, ignorance, but a lack of knowledge of wanting to do good, prepared to sign up for it, but then the actual quantitative reality and the capacity to meet it. The question is, what happens next? Do people say, we now realize what we have to do and prepare to do it, or do they react in a different way by missing targets or by trying to reset? And I guess we're all going to experience that in the business communities collectively when individual businesses realize the aggregation of their individual plans cannot possibly be consistent with the national or international targets in the short term. In time they can be, but in the short term, do we keep the business community on side? Do we keep them on side on the ESG agenda? Do they start to cite the social and governance issues being more important to them than the environmental ones in the short term? Are the ESG component parts complementary or are they substitutable? These are some of the things that may seem academic, but actually I think they're going to be very firmly stretching the business communities in the short term. Roberto, I'll stop at that point. I'm conscious of time.
I think it has been highly interesting, and I cannot agree more that the worst thing you can do is just to commit to something to which you are not prepared because of lack of information, because of ignorance, because you are raising expectations that at a given moment you will have to be up to them. So, but it's challenging not to be also ambitious, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, we have to play all on the same direction. But this is a powerful message, and we'll have to also to be very, very well following it in terms of the guidance that we provide to our own members and companies. And we have here also with us Neil Derrick. And Neil Derrick is also the leader, the executive director of a business and employee organization on Trinidad Tobago. And it's very, very often the case that in the Caribbean we have a very active members in the area of course, of climate change, environment, and it's a pleasure also to have you with us. Also, we would like to know also your experience precisely in a context which is much more sensitive from a business perspective to the climate change and the consequence that it has for business survival, not just to the pandemic right now, but also so thank you, Neil. I don't know whether your sound is okay, because we had some issues with your sound. Can you?
I'm testing, Robert, are you hearing me? I'm testing here.
Yes,
are you hearing me?
We can hear you. Please not be very close to the micro.
Okay, sure.
And then I ask you the contrary to Aris, just be a little bit far from the micro.
Okay, sure. That's better. All right, thank you, Roberto. Thanks for your invitation, and recognizing all the other speakers that went by. We in Trinidad are glad to participate in this activity. Obviously, we've been members of the IOE, the ILO, and the UN, and our government has actually created a strategic vision for that would have aligned with these SDGs, and would have set the same timeline of 2030. And up to 2020, we would have reported on 8 of those. But I think while all that is happening, what we've seen is COVID has brought real to life an experience of how we'll be impacted by these virus, and how do we react it. And has brought us really to the point where the lockdowns in our country started as far back as the 23rd of March. And while we've had some concessions along the way, we've never really opened back up. And now we're in a third wave, and we've actually started on the midnight, the 15th of May, we went into we're now in a state of emergency. So we've seen real life how COVID impacts, and we also know that some of the changes that are coming with COVID would not disappear. How we've seen that as well is that even when the government created initiatives, it was difficult to reach those that most needed. So we saw, in light of in respect to the informal communities, the small and medium, what we saw happening is, in some cases, they weren't registered because even though they worked in as informal workers in the formal system, they weren't registered because of non-conformance. And a lot of the other informal were not registered. So being able to reach them was a difficulty. We don't understand how difficult that was in terms of reaching them. Our economy, based on 2030 and the 2020 figures, mainly oil. Obviously, we had the government that shut down the refinery and is in the process of trying to find a new operator. We've seen some challenges with gas. So we've seen some crunch on our economy, which also impacted about a 7.8 decline in 2020. And we're seeing with all these restrictions that we may even have it further in 2021. So recovery for us is important, and not recovery in the way that we understood it before, but recovery in line with a lot of things that have been raised by you and a lot of the speakers before, because all those things I think we don't know that we have to take into consideration, because what we now understand what that impact is, right? We think that there might be some areas too as we look forward, because we are realizing that a lot of the research work that was done by groups like yours, the ILO and the UN, and we have to adopt those into our systems for them to work. We see education in terms of alignment. We see that link with UNESCO and the UN. We see the ILO putting some good skill requirements, right, into the ISU. While we have an NOCTT, which is the National Occupational Classification of Trinidad and Tobago, we've not continued to update it. We've not kept our skill records. So we see a lot of opportunities for being able to link with the government, to be able to provide that kind of skill training and development for what is required to operate in the new. We also see some of those areas, areas like food security, things like those that will create a significant number of jobs if we approach them by proper education, proper training. And we see that there could be a lot of overflow if we get the large companies to invest into those apprenticeships that flows over into the smaller companies. So we're really happy to be part of this, because we see a lot of the advice being necessary as it integrates into how we go forward into those three platforms: economic, social, and environment. And yes, we have environmental laws, and we supposed to have an environmental commission. So we know that all those laws are going to come, but laws by themselves, as we've seen based on the impact, does not work. So I will stop here.
No, yeah, I take the point of your skill and training angle, okay, because I think it's one of the, as we already highlighted before, it's a key aspect also precisely to bring this transition, and also the role that you are playing. Thank you, Neil, for your time and also for your commitment also with that. We also have a really good expert from an important organization of IOE, who is the Confederación de la Producción y del Comercio de Chile, and is Jorge Cáceres, Director of Sociedad de Fomento Fabril, so FOFA. And I have a question for you. I mean, we have been also witnessing also the developments on precisely in the COP, the COP organization in Chile, and all the challenges that you have, but also how the business community has engaged intensively on that. And we also have been liaising with you. We would like also to know better about your approach on sustainability, and also linking now to the recovering aspect. And we are very much aware that in Chile also the situation is not easy, not just from an environmental perspective, but also from the S perspective, and how the SOFA, but also CPC is really trying to lead this conversation, and also to influence the policy, again, in an ambitious but realistic manner at the same time. Thank you, Jorge, also for joining us.
Thank you, Robert. Just to confirm that you see the slide.
We can perfectly see it.
Perfect. First of all, I would like to thank the International Organization of Employees and the planners of the meeting for the invitation. Thanks a lot. I am part of the Environmental and Energy Center of SOFOFA. I am director of that. SOFOFA is part of the CPC, the major industrial association of Chile. I have the pleasure of being part of the Geo-Business Advisory Committee too. And we are now launched a lot of brief this year concerning environmental topics, and many recommendations to deal with climate change and other environmental challenges. Here there is a picture of Chile. Just to say that we have the highest GDP per capita in the Latin American region, and we are some of the most open economy around the world. This is very, very important. And Chile is now crossing a very particular situation. We have to deal not only with climate change effects and the pandemic, but with the social crisis that started on 2019. It has been a very complicated situation. The cumulative effect of the social outbreak and the pandemic implies the destruction of around 1 million jobs along the country. And my vision about how to insert sustainability in production and business is based on the perspective of a developing country. In fact, Chile, like any developing country, and especially within the Latin American region, present a strong challenge to overcome poverty. And all this implies that we must be extremely efficient in the use of the resources. That is a key issue. We are promoting from the industrial sector a strong public-private collaboration strategy based on 3 action lines. One of them is better environmental information. The second is better capabilities. And the third is related with projects with high socio-environmental benefits. we have signed a lot of agreement involving our industrial federation and the authorities around the country. And they are focused on several environmental topics and seeks to increase capacities in accordance with the action lines I mentioned before. The results are very good. For example, we are conducting projects oriented to come with better quality monitoring networks around the country in collaboration with experts from abroad. For example, the Finnish Meteorological Institute is working with that. And we expect to come with very good information. At the same time, for example, we are conducting studies oriented to come with better information related with the emissions in collaboration with VTT of Finland too. With very important results, identifying gaps of the monitoring standard in comparison with the developed countries. With this kind of study, we have now better information and regulation. This is a key issue. This kind of information, better information, provides better regulations such as taxes and other kind of policies that permit some important achievements. For example, now Chile present one of the highest rates of penetration of renewable energy in the world. This is very important because it's a key measure in order to achieve the carbon neutrality. In fact, our NDC considers the penetration of the renewable energy has a key part of things. One of the most important effects is the reduction of the price of electricity around the country. This permits, for example, a lot of results, very important results, in order to decarbonization the electricity market generation. At the same time, Chile appears as the most competitive producer of green hydrogen along the world. We have very nice perspective of that. As a result of collaborative work, we are able to promote the economic instruments such as taxes and compensation requirements. And we are now incented about a portfolio of emission projects. For example, we have now a very important program in order to replace wood burning for electricity in many homes. We have lead replacement of fireworks in more than 2,000 homes for which we have the collaboration of companies such as Enel, and well-known company. And at the same time, we are leading for example, the electricity mobility. The new instrument and the low cost of electricity implies that Chile chose now the largest electricity bus fleet outside China. This is a very good achievement. And yeah, concerning circular economy, we are conducting a strategy to add some materials categorized like waste now to the economy with very good results too. We are happy that the social crisis is being channeled through the institutional way. It's very important. And at the same time, Chile is one of the highest vaccination rates worldwide. This presents a positive perspective for the next year. And finally, all of these actions are accompanied by the design of better financial instruments. And we expect that all of this kind of action permit to Chile be a reference, not only for Latin America, but also for the world. Thanks a lot.
Thank you to you, Jorge. And I know it's very early there. Also for the effort made. I think you gave us many important figures in terms of how Chile is being placed, and also the business community is engaged in terms of the future scenario, but also bringing this of social and also environmental challenges, which makes you a country which can have both. On one side, you can have the best of the scenarios in terms of competitiveness, but if you do not handle it well, it can be among the worst. So to some extent, I can understand. So it depends on how smart you all together are and how smart we are helping you to have the right policies right now, also to recovery and also for social stability. Thank you for your input. Noreen, great to have you. I mean, we know her, and we are working on a weekly basis with Noreen on many aspects, but mainly also, well, one of the main aspects, of course, has to do with environmental change and how we bring also the voice of business together, not just here in this platform, but also in many UN activities. So I just have to say, from Noreen, apart from her profile as a big, as a very active, engaged, committed person, is also the representative, a vice chair of USCIB, the USA Council for Business, is our member in the USA, and a very, very engaged member of IOE. Really, the fact that you are with us is not just showing how important is this organization, but also how leading you are also within the global business community, precisely in this aspect. So thank you very much for joining us. You are a very important panelist also for us. I also ask you to be conscious of timing, because we are also running a little bit late, but I'm sure that you are very much aware of how to put the right messages on a short period of time. Thank you so much again.
So thank you so much for that very warm introduction, Roberto, and I'm so delighted to be with you. We are indeed very proud members of the International Organization of Employers, and we're so delighted to work with you because of your practical perspective and your ability to see the full picture on behalf of the private sector and on behalf of society as a whole. So if I may just take a quick moment to introduce my organization and then speak to the topic of the recent Leaders Climate Summit in Washington, to give you a little bit of an insight of where the US is and where US business is, talk a little bit about the nationally determined contributions or national pledges, and then make a recommendation. So in a nutshell, what sets my organization, the United States Council for International Business, apart, aside from our proud role in the IOE, is that, first of all, we have been involved in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, representing American business since 1993. We have standing there. So our journey with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change goes back to the pre-COP days, and we're very much looking forward to an in-person COP26 in Glasgow. Secondly, we have standing with the UN Environment Program. And again, we've been working with UNEP and very glad to participate in the very open environment. Indeed, I think UNEP is a leader and a gold standard for engaging with stakeholders, including business. And we're looking very much forward to UNEP 5.2 and being back on the beautiful campus of UNEP next year. And then thirdly, we're quite active, since we're headquartered in New York at the UN in New York. We're the only US business group with standing to the Economic and Social Council, which makes us quite active on the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. And we're very proud to co-chair with IOE, the Business and Industry Major Group that is active on SDGs. So on the Leaders Climate Summit, I can say two things very rapidly. The first is that it really signaled, from a US standpoint, the intention of the Biden administration to take a full all-of-government approach to climate change. We had mobilized at that summit every cabinet level representative of our government, our defense secretary, our trade representative, our labor secretary, of course. And indeed, that's very relevant, because one of the main selling points that the Biden administration has made about intense climate action and stepping up our game is not just because it's environmentally the right thing to do, but also that it will create millions of jobs and put the US economy back on track. So we heard that message very strongly articulated. I think the second takeaway from the Leaders Climate Summit was the nationally determined contributions that were put on the table and announced, notably the US nationally determined contribution pledging 50 to 52% reduction against 2005 levels by 2030. But as other speakers have said, first of all, even with more ambitious pledges that are coming through, it's not enough when you add it all up. And then I think the second observation, which now takes us into the second point, is that many of these NDCs talk about the what, but not about the how. And the how is what really matters, as I think the colleague from IBAC, Mr. McCoy, mentioned. Objectives are wonderful, but how are you going to deliver those objectives? And I think the point that I want to make with regard to the nationally distributed contributions is that they are absolutely—
Noreen, your audio is breaking up.
We have a connection challenge with you, Noreen. We lost Noreen.
No, it's still, the audio just took a hit. It's very broken up currently.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Sorry about that. I took myself off camera, so apologies, but hopefully that will prevent any further glitches. So I think the point I'd like to make for my presentation is that there's a lot more work to do and a lot more opportunity to enhance the NDCs for implementation. And the way to do that is to bring in the private sector and to strive for truly inclusive all of economy NDCs. We're only at the second generation of NDCs. And as Roberto said in his introduction, they still only present a partial picture from the standpoint of policy measures, but also a partial picture in terms of the extent to which they have engaged with their private sector. We're very fortunate that through IOE, through ILO, through the UNFCCC, we have seen many very helpful conversations, and those should continue, but then also at the national level. And we've done a lot of analysis on this at USCIB, that many governments, although they are starting to lean towards a conversation with their business communities, and we again have heard some examples, there's still a lot of work to do to bring in the full spectrum of business, including SMEs, including all the many employers that make up economies, whether in developed or developing countries, and to take due account of the connections between national action and the global marketplace and the global regulatory environment. So I think in order to keep things brief, I'm going to cut to the chase and really talk about the recommendation that we want to make looking ahead to COP26, working hand in hand with IOE, looking ahead, down the road, because COP26, as important a turning point as it will be, is just the beginning of further cycles of review and action and ratcheting up of ambition, is first of all, to engineer into the UNFCCC process a platform for business and industry, a really recognized ongoing consultation, such as exists in the ILO, such as exists in other forums, such as the OECD, so that we really can reflect not just the what, but the how, and bring in these important business actors, employers, innovators, implementers, so that we can look ahead to a path that brings us inclusive ambition, inclusive recovery, and really a resilient approach to what we talked about and what we heard so clearly expressed by Joyce Masuya at the beginning. These are interconnected challenges. Business is the source of the solutions, and we can and should be doing more to really bring business in and embed them as not just part of the solution, but as part of the dialogue and partnership that we will be taking forward into Glasgow and thereafter. So with that, I'll conclude. Thank you so much for inviting me.
That's a very critical message. And you referred to the second wave, the second generation of the NDGs. The idea of inclusiveness perhaps is it's not still there as it should be in terms of the private sector being engaged and private sector being consulted and dialogue before you also forward also any kind of commitment. At the end of the day, this gap of information also has to do much with it. So we'll follow up also very closely with you. So we finished this round of interventions, but Robert, there is one question. Can you read it for us?
Yeah, no problem. So we will just have a little question from the audience before we go to the next panel. And this question is pertinent to all of the participants of the first panel. So if any of you feel like you have an answer in a minute or two, that would be great. So an anonymous attendee asked, in the shift to environmental sustainability, sectors are affected in different ways, and also their responses are different because of the way work is organized. UNEP has worked on a global stock-taking report on sustainability and circularity in the textile value chain, and it is now working on a sectoral roadmap. So the question is, how can employers' organizations better support sectoral responses and strategies to environmental sustainability and circularity? So how can employers' organizations better support sectoral responses?
Any volunteer? Not needed, all of you.
I have a provocative answer.
That's what we need.
Okay, well, first of all, very much welcome the question. And indeed, the focus on sectors is really a critical one. We see that in many NDCs, we see that in a lot of analysis, and it's very much to be encouraged. But actually the opportunity is across sectors. Actually the opportunity, and that's where employers' organizations do provide such a vital and unique role, is that in the IOE, you have all the sectors sitting together. You see the reality of supply and value chains, both at the national and the international level. And I think if we're really going to exploit the full potential that we need in ambition and inclusiveness on all of the fronts that pertain to the Paris Agreement and its commitments, of course, we want to mobilize sectors, but more importantly, we want to bring the sectors together and be more than the sum of their parts. Thank you.
And if I may add, believe me, it's not easy bringing all them together, but that's also a critical added value. I think yes, the sectoral approach is very important, because at the end of the day, is how you land. But having a cohesive answer, that's much more difficult. Any other answer on that before we go to the next panel? Aris? I hope that your micro is okay. Or Neil, a quick answer.
Neil,
Neil, okay, go ahead, Neil, and then Aris.
I was just to add to what Noreen is saying. I think that while it's important that we do have the data in terms of sectoral and look at the entire development support, it is also important that we look, because it is not a single item, because development in one area impacts another, as she said. So I think there's some benefit, because you also was aware that when we had this impact, because you didn't have that segregation, it was hard to understand the impact on each sector and how you respond to them. So I think that is important to have that sectoral data, but it's also important to look at the whole.
Sorry, thank you, Neil. Now, Ari, can you also give us your feedback on that?
So, thank you. The one comment that I would make is, from experience with Employers Association, I mean, there's a great opportunity and a need now to engage with some of the scenarios and some of the projections of change and what the future holds. And so to understand what's lying ahead. And so it's not just to protect what we've had so far, it's both to protect and be able to recreate the path forward. So that would be the message that I would use.
Yeah, this is also an important message. It's not just to preserve, to protect, it's looking ahead and also anticipate and project what's coming. Okay. Jorge, do you feel comfortable if I don't give you the floor right now? You didn't hear me well. We go to the next panel because we are running out of time. Let's just feel that you have to. And I now have, you know, we don't have much time. Now I have my deputy, Matthias Storms, being the moderator. It's much more challenging for him because we are running out of time. but we'll be engaging, and also we'll have a kind of takeaways, commitments also from our side to follow up this discussion. Thank you, Matthias. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Roberto, and greetings from sunny Geneva to all of us. So we heard at the beginning from the international organization, from UNEP, from the ILO. We then heard from employers and business organizations. And now it is really hearing from company what are the practical experience they facing on their journey to the decarbonization. And we have an exciting panel with us. Quickly, let me introduce our speakers. We have Karen Westley. She is the Vice President for Safety and Environment at Shell. We have Eva Carranza. She is the lead for the circular economy at LafargeHolcim. We have Martin Francis Kieni, who is the board member of the Roofings Group. And we have Anirban Ghosh, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Mahindra Group. So thank you for joining. We're really looking forward to your intervention. And I encourage all of you to ask questions. We have the Q&A session, and this is a joint exercise, right? We want to have joint understandings here. So please put your comments, your questions, everything you want in it. I will make sure we have time to follow up on them. It will not be in vain. Karen, I directly would like to start with you. Shell already undertook quite a lot of effort in your journey for decarbonization. I guess because of the court ruling yesterday, this will even be more intense now in the near future. Now, I really want to know from you, how do you do this internally within Shell, right? These transformation processes, I think there must be a lot of insecurities also for a lot of colleagues. And how do you do it externally? Who are the partners you are engaging with in order to drive this process forward? Over to you, Karen.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you all hear me well? Great. Okay, I'm going to share my screen too, so please do shout if you don't see what's coming through. Before that, I will start with a question around collaborating by speaking about the United Nations Environment Programme, who we collaborate closely with on the oil and gas methane partnership. So just wanted to give a shout out to that organization that has convened a pretty dynamic group of companies to talk about reducing methane emissions around the globe. And thank you for referring to the legal case. At the moment, we're still really analyzing the implications, but I'll refer to it a little bit as I talk more about how we're tackling the net zero emissions component of our Powering Progress strategy. So this slide essentially just shows all the elements of our core business strategy. And as you can see, net zero emissions, powering lives, and respecting nature are part and parcel of Shell's approach to business. So that's what we'll be talking about today, with an emphasis on the net zero emissions area, since that's both topical because of the court case and also because that was the question of the day from the organizers of the conference. Just to go back to UNEP, I was born and raised in Kenya and joined Shell 20 years ago because I cared so much about sustainable development. I joined Shell in the Shell Foundation from the humanitarian NGO called CARE, and was really pleased this year when Shell began to disclose our contribution to all the sustainable development goals, knowing that they are interactive, interrelated, and that companies really do need to talk about how they contribute to what 194 governments have agreed is the pathway to sustainability. So with that in mind, I just wanted to highlight that whereas I will focus on climate change today as the key theme, we work actively across the sustainability space on people. We've spoken a lot today about the impacts on labor and the workforce related to COVID. We work a lot on other aspects of the planet. So as we heard, I'm the Vice President for Environment, have just launched a set of new commitments on biodiversity, circular economy, water and waste reduction, and then also very much on the area of people. And as I said, when I joined Shell, I joined in the Shell Foundation and helped set up a program to deliver cleaner cook stoves and clean energy to now 100 million people around the world. So just wanted to make it clear that this is an interactive set of commitments from the company. And although I will deep dive on climate change, I'd be very happy to engage with any of you about any of these other topics as well, near and dear to my heart. So back to climate change and what our goals are. And I'll refer a little bit to what the court case is talking about in the last couple of days. So our climate target is to be net zero by 2050. And that implicates all of our emissions from the production of our energy products, as well as from the use of those. So all the way from drilling for oil, refining it, and then of course the use of it in a car, which is on the customer end. Or you could think of the same from the supply chain and the value chain of aviation, or indeed electricity. And the comments about value chain and sectors is where we're really putting most of our effort in collaboration around working across sectors to help sectors decarbonize, given that we are both in the demand and the supply side of many of these sectors, and many of our customers are faced with the same challenges as the producers in those supply chains. So what we have set about to do is to reduce the carbon intensity of all our energy sold, which takes into account this full value chain perspective and the scope 1, 2, and 3. And the goals are to be, of course, net zero by 2050, and for these different milestones along the way. Now, the court case in the Netherlands focused on you see the 2030 and the 2035. 2035, we had a minus 45%, and in 2030, we had minus 20. And what the court case is asking is for more urgency to get to that 45% by 2035. So to use a Kenyan phrase, haraka haraka, which means hurry, hurry. And this really means that the urgency around climate change is felt, of course, by companies, but very much by society and the NGOs and other stakeholders who are active in campaigning for reductions of emissions across companies and across society. Now, the energy challenge is certainly challenging for everybody. And of course, for those who are going through the energy transition to get more energy, it's also challenging to have access to clean and modern energy. So we're not trying to diminish that in a way by talking about reducing our energy. So the way we'll do that is in a number of different ways. And the scale of change depends very much on some enablers in society and in governments that I'll talk about in my next slide. And just briefly, operational efficiency, the scope 1 emissions clearly have to really focus on reducing that as much as possible, but that's really only a small component of the entire value chain emissions. About 80% of emissions from Shell products come from the use of the product, so the use of fuel, for example, in a combustion engine, as opposed to from its production. But given that the stock of carbon in the environment is so high and needs to come down very dramatically and quickly, we're also focusing a lot on sinks. And these are natural sinks in the sense of forests. So I'm an ecologist, so planting trees is always a positive thing, but of course the right trees, the right mix of species, and with the right support from stakeholders, both governments, but also social performance, local communities who depend on those resources, but also carbon capture and storage, which is a high technical way of basically taking point source emissions of CO2 and re-injecting them very deep underground, either in depleted gas fields or in deep saline aquifers. We're also working very hard on investing in low carbon power business, as well as in low carbon fuels, and actively investing in the renewables, renewable energy. So we've invested $3 billion in the last 18 months in renewable developments around the world. And much of our investments are depending on the pace, of course, of development of those sectors. So we're moving at pace with society. But as we've heard from the court case, the urgency is, of course, even more than what we can keep up with and work harder. And what I wanted to point out in this slide is what it would actually take for a company or even a society or a region or a country to get to net zero emissions. And a few of the milestones along the way that require the deep and extensive collaboration that's been referred to in the last hour and a half. So things like the carbon price. You see in 2040, we would say to get to net zero, we need to already be at 150 euros per ton of carbon, 200 by 2050. Let's look at short haul air travel shifting to rail by 2045, 50% of that. All new buildings being zero carbon rated by between 2025 and 2030. Real accelerated investment in grid extension, solar PV, wind capacity. This needs to triple in just 10 years. And of course, the non-fossil energy sources have to pass 50% of the energy mix for us to be on track as Europe to get to net zero. So I know I've just given you a few little touch points, a little bit of a flavor. As I've said, very happy to engage on any sustainability item, but also on any specifics around our climate change ambition. I hope that's enough for now.
Thank you, Karen. That was indeed a very good start, and I'm sure there will be follow-up questions to you too then in our round of discussions. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Eva, you are the lead of the circular economy, and I'm very proud. My jacket I'm having today is indeed made out of old PET bottles. So it's 100% PET bottles. It's very comfortable. I always wear it, but today I thought it's the right day for sure to have it on. Can you perhaps introduce us a bit in how far the circular economy is linked to the efforts of LafargeHolcim for decarbonization? LafargeHolcim has set some very ambitious targets. You are very much engaged actually in reaching decarbonization with zero pledge. So if you could connecting the dots between both, that would be great. Thank you.
So thanks a lot, Matthias. So hello, everyone. I'm Eva Carranza, and as Matthias mentioned, I'm the global lead of the Circular Economy Initiatives for LafargeHolcim. And just so that you know what LafargeHolcim is, a very short background. We're leaders on the building material and construction sector. We operate in around 2,300 sites and have roughly 70,000 employees and are present all over the world in roughly 70 countries. Now, why is for us the overall concept of building back an important topic? And this is for something that probably you didn't know, but concrete is the second most used material in the world, directly after water. And that really gives a magnitude idea. And you know, there are some estimates that claim that there is a New York City being built every month. And this is quite important for our sector because it basically means that we have yearly around 40% of the total resources that are being extracted from Earth every year. Around 40% of it goes to housing and infrastructure, which is exactly the sector that we are being one of the leaders on providing. And we see this, and we see that also we have a problem that the world at the moment, it's only 8.6% circular, according to the latest Circularity report. And that basically means that less than 9% of the total volumes of materials that we extract from Earth are being actually reused or recycled into other products. And you know, on the other hand, we see that there is 1.6 billion people that are lacking adequate housing. So we have seen the need as a business to improve how society works and interacts with the planet, while still being able to provide for those needs that the people are having. And as a business, we see that we needed to accelerate that transition. So we took the opportunity to build back the economy, or to get all the momentum to try to find the best ways to really decouple our consumption of virgin material from our growth as a business. And answering that need to build back better was that we decided to sign the Net Zero Pledge with the validated targets from the Science Based Target Initiative. And now this, it's a very ambitious pledge. It's a very ambitious objective. And it basically has circular economy as the critical pillar of that net zero journey. And this is because circular economy is the main enabler for our sector to be able to reduce those CO2 emissions. And estimates are that around 40% of the CO2 emissions of the most carbon intensive industries can be reduced if circular economy is put on its most at work. Now, one of the major targets that we have within this net zero pledge strategy is to recycle 100 million tons of materials, which we expect to be able to deliver by 2030. And this will also go hand in hand with the fact that we are already doing quite a lot of things. We're committed to reach from 22% recycling ratio that we have in cement, which is our main market or our main business segment. We're committed to reach a 30% increase by 2030. And we are also committed to double the construction and demolition waste that we have in our business, further closing our own materials loop. Now, the main objective of all these circularity initiatives are really to create a business out of it. So each of these projects where we expect to increase the recyclability of our products and also increase the amount of recycled material that we're using, it's actually expected to have a positive return on investment. And we're doing this by trying to replace the virgin raw materials that we have within our production and scanning through our own markets close to where our main factories are, which other minerals could be used, which are byproducts or waste from other industries. Now, the good thing is that you improve the logistics, improve materials efficiency and utilization. And this implies that in most of the cases, the cost of sourcing is actually lower. And that's why you have the positive return. So we're very confident that the business case is there. But we also believe that there's some things that need to happen so that we can really make this work for the business. And one of the first things is that we need to create transparency for our customers. And we need to give the customers that possibility of making an informed decision when they buy the products, of really understanding what would be the environmental impacts that they're having. And that's why we are proactively communicating the environmental profile of the products in the markets. The second aspect is that we need to work on the innovation side, and we need to be already now rethinking how things are being done, and we need to develop the future generation of products and future generation of solutions of everything throughout the value chain, and have to start thinking with the end of life in mind already, so that you can really leverage as well the digital, and you can reinvent how things are currently being done. And the third aspect, which for me is one of the most important, is that partnering with the key organizations is really important to be able to drive that change. And here I think it's very important that we understand that no single organization, no matter how big and how global you are, will be able to really drive the change. And that's also one of the reasons why we joined the SBTI ambition. So we believe that that coalition of companies taking action to win this race to net zero, it's really important. And it does, of course, brings a lot of challenges, as you need to require a lot of alignment between very different stakeholders. But I believe it's the only way that you can make the change and move forward. And one of the, or some of the opportunities that you might see through this type of coalitions is that you will have at your fingertips the access to experts that can independently assess and approve the targets that you and your sector have. And you also have the experts that can define and promote the best practices. And this science-based type of mindset, we want to be able to have it not only on the CO2, but also on the recyclability or circularity. And we're also, of course, doing the same with the nature-based solutions that we have. I think that's pretty much it from my side.
Thank you, Eva. That's really fascinating, really clear concept with the three big pillars, the 3 pillars project. That's really appreciated. Martin, thank you so much for joining us. And you in the roofing group have been very engaged also in the effort to decarbonize your business. We are very appreciative. If you could speak a bit about, on the one hand, what are you doing within the roofing group to achieve the target of decarbonization, but also perhaps a bit broader. What is the approach of the business community, of the employers in Uganda? You know, do you follow the same approach? Do you have different priorities? Over to you.
Thank you, Matthias, and thank you everyone for listening in. First, I will first introduce my company, Roofings Group. It's a family-based business, and we do believe that a journey of 1,000 elephants starts with one. And in that regard, our chairman, Dr. Sikanda Lalani, came into Uganda with about $2 million, and today the business is about $320 million, and having a presence in Uganda, in Kenya, and also in Ghana. So it's becoming an African out company, but before it was a Ugandan company, basically. And the really heart of our business is sustainability, and that's what we do believe in. And we've seen the growth in that area, including that, taking note that in Africa, it's very difficult to manage, to be profitable when you're trying to be sustainable. Among the initiatives we have in this regard, we have 3 dimensions. We do what we call forever forestry, forever education, and forever health. And these are really guided by the sustainability development goals, for which drive our business. In these areas, in systems, we do invest in systems that actually are sustainable. For example, during the making of roofing sheets, we do actually we invested in an acid regeneration plant, about $5 million. Yet actually most of the steel sector in Africa doesn't look into that. So we recycle all the acid that we use in our systems. In education, we do believe that sustainability can only be started when you're a child. I think, and we do actually engage schools, we engage communities to train them so that when they grow and they become business people, they also value sustainability. In addition, construction is one of the biggest, we could say, one of the biggest industries that destroy actually the environment where we live in. In that respect, we do provide free seedlings to society, and we do encourage everyone in our community, whoever is going to construct a house, at least to plant a tree or two. And so far, we do distribute about 30,000 seedlings to communities. And for health, we do participate in quite a number of health initiatives. And of recent, with the COVID challenge in the country, we are providing free oxygen to the hospitals in Uganda. And that really makes sure that we don't waste this oxygen because we produce it, but we don't use much of it. So we do actually what we call a social industrial integration, and therefore give it to hospitals to be able to treat people. With regard to employers in Uganda, we've seen quite some changes in business that has been caused by the COVID scenario, and which are positive to the environment. They've changed sourcing due to the logistical challenges. The sourcing where business people used to import products that are manufactured within the country or the region, now they are actually engaging into B2B integrations within the community, and therefore they reduce really emissions in freight. We've seen recycling escalating in the areas of steel, plastics, and paper. And this has really encouraged reusing, it has encouraged reusing of the waste other than importing raw materials again. Capital has also been diverted in productive sectors, and that has helped really to engage businesses locally and also to increase jobs. Previously, we had many people importing goods from so many other markets, but now they engage into productive sectors, research and development in areas such as agro-processing, manufacturing, and that really links businesses and therefore allows for what we call a community that at least doesn't look into importation, but actually looks into production and therefore reducing a lot of freight miles. Working from home has been quite one of the transitions that has happened in the country, and we've seen actually jobs being produced, reducing commuting emissions, which has been good for the environment. Specifically, Roofing's group, we had a lot of initiatives we did during the COVID pandemic, and we've seen quite a lot of results. Actually, 2020 was one of our best years. With regard to staff, there was an issue of immobility of staff during the lockdowns. And we advise staffs actually to use non-motorized transport, also stay near the homework, to stay near the workplace. And that really allowed us to continue business, retain jobs, and also reduce commuting emissions. Logistical challenges due to border controls. We've diverted most of our cargo to rail transport, and that is really good for the community and also for the environment. We've also engaged in increasing our recycling of acids, metals, and plastics, which actually helps to calm down the price increases that have been witnessed during this period of time. Since 2020, we've seen escalating raw material prices, but when you recycle, you actually try to reduce that impact of the increasing prices. And again, on markets, we lost out on some markets because of the border controls. But with that, we did realize that actually we have a community who are manufacturers who would take some of the products we produce to go and add some value to them. and that value chain has been enhanced in the country. We've seen that before COVID, we had about 15 manufacturers buying from us, but now it's up to 45 local manufacturers buying from us. And as such, we do monitor a lot of our activities in environmental management. And we are the first company to do global reporting initiatives. Environmental reporting, sustainability reporting, using the global reporting initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Very fascinating. Also, particularly because you focus on the impact of COVID, which is, of course, very pertinent, right? We're all feeling it. So directly making the link to what is the impact of COVID on your journey for decarbonization. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Anirban, thank you for joining us. You are the Chief Sustainability Officer of Mahindra. Mahindra is a huge conglomerate of very different sectors. I would guess that different sectors are impacted differently by COVID-19. How do you ensure that you have your journey for decarbonization, your journey for environmental protection, equally driven in all the different groups within Mahindra? And also, how do you ensure that the focus keeps on decarbonization? Because of COVID, of course, the attention is given to all kinds of thought, and Martin spoke about it, right? The fact that you don't have access to material that you need, the issue about that you need your revenues. Many of your groups, Holt is also part of your group, are of course deeply impacted by COVID and by the lack of tourism. So how you can ensure that the focus stays with the issue about decarbonization? Over to you.
Thank you for your question. Before I start, I must mention that we are hoping Shell, Lafarge both succeed in achieving their goals, because if they achieve their goals, at least two of our businesses will definitely achieve their goals. And therefore, I think we're all in it together, and we should try and support each other to succeed, else none of us will probably succeed. Your question tells me that there has been some effect of an article that I'd written some time ago in December. And the answer to your question, we'd written as a constructive alternativism. Now I'll talk a little bit more about that. Prior to COVID, we were pursuing economic development in the hope that social development will follow. The environment was becoming a casualty. During the COVID lockdowns, the environment prospered, but economic development and social well-being were battered. And you explained some of it in your question. Neither of these situations are desirable. The three-legged stool of people, planet, and profit must be balanced. And that can only happen if we adopt the principles of constructive alternativism. So what is this constructive alternativism all about? It is actually about interpreting and implementing SDG 12, Sustainable Development Goal number 12, responsible consumption and production, both in business and in life. Now, let's start with behavior change in life, being responsible consumers in life. You began by saying your jacket is made from recycled PET. That's a step in the right direction. But think about it. Every morning we begin with a toothbrush. And every toothbrush we have ever used on Earth still exists on Earth. Isn't there a case to move towards responsible consumption by choosing an alternative which is climate friendly, which is great for health, and which opens up opportunities for innovation? So toothbrushes, clothes, perhaps even choice of transportation. Now, in some cases, we have solutions available. In some cases, we don't as of now. But this transition towards responsible consumer behavior is one aspect of constructive alternativism, which opens up opportunities for businesses and for the new jobs that we were talking about in the earlier section. In business, constructive alternativism starts by changing the way we look at a few things. For example, if we start looking at waste as a byproduct, we heard the presentation on circular economy. The principle behind circular economy is to look at waste as a byproduct and to create value. And this is value you can create even when there is a disruption like COVID. Similarly, constructive alternativism in a business is about looking at energy as being precious, not using more than is necessary to produce output simply because energy is available, and for looking at things like water as being valuable, even though there is no economic cost attached to the water that we get. But we took a simple look at it and said, you know, whenever there is water shortage, the cuts are first made to business. And if we had to shut the factory for one day, we were possibly going to lose $500,000. And is it therefore not worth it to ensure that we use water responsibly and enable the use of water responsibly in the community around? So these are ways in which one can practice constructive alternativism, both in our own lives and in business. Now, to be able to do it, obviously, there should be technologies and solutions available. We can make the transition to bamboo toothbrushes today with charcoal bristles. They're available, but we need to. And I don't know how many people have made that transition. We can make a transition to energy efficient devices because they're available now. That technology is there. Energy efficient motors, air conditioners, lights, you name it, it's there. 10 years ago, it wasn't. So today it is possible to make that change. And the amount of money we save by changing to these new devices simply from energy cost saved is large enough not to laugh at. The returns are, the payback periods are often less than a year, at times a little less than 2 years. There are some technologies we would definitely want to move to clean transportation, but in many countries that technology is not yet fully available. And if it is not fully available, we have to try and make sure that we get there as quickly as possible. And that's where some of our experiments are. After a lot of experimentation, we now have an economically feasible three-wheeled cargo, battery-powered three-wheeled cargo solution available. It's already reached 60% market share in India. It's a lovely little vehicle suitable for many countries, certainly in the developing world, which can just transition from fossil fuel powered three-wheelers to battery powered three-wheelers. Typically, the clean transportation conversation, thanks perhaps to Tesla, has moved towards four-wheelers. But when you look at the developing market, two-wheelers and three-wheelers probably cause much more emissions than four-wheelers in those markets. So a lot of experiments led to this solution. But experiments must be done because even the failures give you a lot of learning. So we are still trying to figure out how to use the slag that comes from a steel plant, and instead of sending it to landfill or giving it away for co-processing, is it possible to create some value out of it? The experiments we've done have not been very successful yet, but the experiments are on. Similarly, crop residue is a problem because farmers need to burn it, and that causes a lot of emissions. So is there a way we can use it, let's say, for construction material or for some other charcoal-related solution? So these are experiments that are going on now, and these experiments will lead to solutions in the space of constructive alternativism. Despite COVID, if we are managing to thrive, it is because we are looking at the adoption of effective, feasible technologies and experimenting with technologies that are expected to be effective, though not yet commercially viable. These kinds of actions are helping us find new sources of revenue or value streams. It's helping us reduce cost, it's helping us reduce risk, and it is helping us attract and retain talent. In short, it is helping us being more resilient to disruptions like COVID has caused. We have to move to a low carbon economy and net zero world. But the Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stone. We will thrive in a low carbon world because we will have to do things differently, and we will do things differently. Things we call constructive alternativism. And it's not only us. Every presentation you've heard today, especially from the companies, from Shell, Lafarge, Roofings, the actions being taken are all examples of constructive alternativism. And it is by looking at things like this that we are able, the company is able to survive this disruption. Thank you for the question. That's what I wanted to share as an answer to the question you asked me.
No, that is great. And we really would appreciate if you would allow us to circulate your concept about constructive alternativism. Very hard to speak for German, I must say, to among the audience. So I really encourage you, if you are interested to get the article, reach out to us. We're more than happy to circulate it. Or we circulate it to all the people who have registered for this event. If you would agree with it, Anirban, that would be really great, because I think it's a really fascinating concept.
Pleasure's mine. Please go ahead and circulate.
Perfect, thank you. I think we have two questions. The first one is, and it really relates to all of you. What can we do to make consumptions more environmentally friendly, to make it more sustainable? We have heard from different people, focusing on consumption. Eva, you spoke about it as one of your 3 pillars, actually, right? And Martin, you spoke about it, going to schools and already in schools explaining what does it mean. So, and I believe Karen, actually, one of the key issues for you will be going forward, how do you make consumption more sustainable? So how do you engage with the client, with the consumers? Any initiatives, any ideas? Who want to start? We are only a few small groups, so you can directly come in.
To be honest, I think the first start, it's really letting them know what the differences are between the options they have available. And what is the, let's say, environmental implication of their options.
That's a good point. And you spoke about it, Eva, very briefly. You collaborate with the Carbon Disclosure Project, I believe, which I assume these kind of frameworks help you to give credible information to consumer. Any other framework initiative you're partnering with for that?
Yeah, I mean, we're partners with different industry associations as well, and also partners with different non-industry but more NGO associations on particular topics, depending on the expertise that we need. And that's, for me, also one of my other pillars is like creating that understanding that everyone's talking about apples when we're talking about apples, and understanding that, the way we measure should be really key, not only between the industry players, but how we pass it across to the consumers.
And I guess trust is a key issue there, right? And that is the reason why probably it's so important to partner also not only with industry associations, but also with NGOs in order to create this trust. Anyone who wants to come in? Karen, Martin, when it comes to how to trigger, encourage consumption?
Yeah, we've been actively collaborating with our customers on decarbonizing their emissions. As I said, the value chain emissions are 80% in scope 3 compared to scope 1 and 2. And then those, we've a couple of examples. One of those is working with hard to abate sectors like steel, cement. We've developed a carbon capture and storage project in Norway, which ships CO2 from a waste facility as well as a cement factory to an offshore sink. That's one opportunity where collaborating across industry really allows you to benefit from economies of scale on a large investment in infrastructure and carbon capture and storage. On the very other end of the scale, we've been offering customers in now about 12 markets the opportunity to offset their own vehicle emissions with nature-based solutions, both ones that we are investing in ourselves. So we've invested about $100 million in origination of nature-based solutions by preserving forests, wetlands, soil conservation, grasslands, and also looking more and more at other non-biological things like the stoves. I mentioned cook stoves. We have also been looking at how we fund cook stove programs by offsetting their carbon. So there are a number of different measures like that that we've been offering customers at the very small scale on the retail side, and also on the very large scale with our large industrial partners.
Thank you so much for that. Martin, you wanted to come in.
Sorry. Okay. On our side, really what we are trying to do with the clients is to add that kind of concept to our value chain. We do give customized products. For example, if someone is going to roof a sheet, to roof a house, he's not going to use the standard sheets, which are approximately 3 meters. We do actually customize those sizes so that to help them to be able to use what actually they need, and what they don't need, we retain it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have Aniban, you want to come in?
I tend to agree with Eva that make solutions available to people. There was a survey we did amongst 4,000 people across India. We found that people understood that their actions had a negative impact on the environment, and 90% plus said they understood. 80% plus said they wanted to adopt new solutions, but then they said that they were not aware of solutions that were available. So we've got a program in the company called Make Sustainability Personal. And through this program, we enable both people as well as businesses to be aware of solutions in the low carbon space, which they could adopt in an economically feasible manner. And in the hope that as they adopt it, we will all move forwards towards a low carbon world.
Thank you. There was another question you directly already referred to, which was nature-based solution, and you all spoke about that, right? The different ways you're doing that, and Martin, you did it already before in your presentations, speaking about the trees you are planting and the very impressive number. Now, we are running out of time. There is one question: what companies do you expect, and what do you need from the international organizations like UNEP, like the ILO and others? And that I would like to link with a bit broader question. You know, the ILO Director General Guy Ryder always said the new normal must be a better normal, right? The post-COVID normal must be a better normal. So we have one wish free. What would it be to make it a better normal? And perhaps we go along, starting with you, Karen.
Sure, I think I would have to say Article 6 in the climate accords and the good carbon pricing regime that allows investment in low carbon solutions would be the two asks of the international community.
Perfect, thank you. Eva.
I will add to that. And also I would say, you know, the normal will also start from how our green procurement, especially on the cities and on the government side, are actually giving the right incentives for people to, first of all, to be able to use it and to make it accessible to us.
Thank you. Martin.
Actually, one of the key things is on the carbon credits. This kind of facility is quite difficult to access in countries like ours. If really they can come in and try to be able to help in helping companies to access that kind of a carbon credit, that will be useful. Number two is to actually train people in sustainability reporting so that they know the impact of their actions. That could be quite helpful for the communities also, so that they can appreciate the issue of sustainability. And lastly, is in the advocacy space, especially infrastructure. Mr. Ghosh talked about, transportation that is sustainable, but we really need that those kind of initiatives. Say, for example, we're talking about ferries. Are they powered by solar, or are they going to be powered by gas or fuel? So these kind of things need to be brought on board on advocacy, and also to help people to understand the impact of their actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And Aniban.
Two quick suggestions. One, public procurement of feasible solutions at scale to bring overall costs down so everyone else can buy. It's happened before. It's happened with solar panels in Germany, LED lights in India. So we must keep doing more of it. Second, wherever a solution has become feasible, tinkering with policy so that it makes sense for consumers to buy only that which is good for the climate and good for the economy as well, and not buy the alternative which is not good for the planet anymore.
Thank you. And thank you all of you for this very interesting panel. It was really fascinating. I turn over now to Robert. Robert actually is the mastermind, not only of this webinar, but he's also the mastermind in the IOE's engagement on this topic. So thank you, Robert, for all your work you're doing generally, but also to bring us together, to have the concept and to organize it. And he is really the right person to make the conclusions and to see, what we do next. Over to you, Robert.
Thanks a lot, Matthias. And yeah, so just before we move to the closing of this meeting, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, for providing such interesting perspectives and insights from all of your wealth of experience. So I'm just going to give a small overview of what we've heard so far. So, I think it was a wealth of information, we can all agree. But in the opening remarks, I'd like to remind Joyce's message of, engaging with UNEP further through their environmental assembly, which happens every 2 years, and also the Science Policy Business Forum. I think we're definitely going to look more into that on the IOE side. And then Martha Newton gave us some very interesting remarks as well about ILO work that IOE is very familiar already. But ILO is also, they're becoming a bigger and bigger player, especially as understanding comes closer to the critical link between employment and climate change and environment. In the first panel, I thought it was really great with the employers' organizations, starting with Danny McCoy and hearing his insights on Ireland's incredible economic growth and the challenges that come with it. Yeah, one thing I wanted to remind everybody about was the message from Aris about nature and climate change converging on the policy agenda, and we can really see that from our work. I mean, the agenda has advanced considerably in the last 10 years, and if it's any how would I say, I think we are seeing a kind of exponential acceleration, right? And it's all linking up. So we hear about the decade of action. We are hearing more and more about different commitments and initiatives coming from the private sector. And this, this communication between private sector and the international organizations and governments and the kind of different language that was mentioned. My impression is that it's really, the gaps are being bridged and we're really coming closer to a kind of holistic collaboration. Finally, the last panel, our individual company speakers, I really felt was great. We heard, very interesting examples of bridging some of these challenges of innovative action. Like Roberto said at the beginning, entrepreneurship, innovation, creativeness. These are some of the key elements that we need to scale on the global level. And like Mr. Gosh explained with the concept of constructive alternativism, I think we can all think about some of these things further and try and implement some innovative solutions. As a follow-up and as a kind of outcome of this event, I think we will definitely make the most effort to take this work further. And one of the ideas that was discussed, and I think there was positive feedback about it, was to potentially make this a series of events, a kind of discussion on business, society, and environment between employers, companies, and organizations like ILO and UNEP. IOE is already engaging with ILO in several particular initiatives, not least of which is the Climate Action for Jobs initiative, which is being launched this year in several countries. And they had a regional launch in Africa a couple of months ago. So this is one particular way where we can engage directly with these organizations and implement some measures on the ground on the national level. And I will reach out to all of you individually after the event as a follow-up, and we will continue this conversation definitely. And also just to remind you, UNEP's GEO for Business series of briefs was launched this year, and only the first brief has been published so far. But then the following briefs will go much more into detail on some of the topics we've discussed today. So there will be a particular brief for the circular economy, a particular brief for deep decarbonization, and also for collaboration. So you will all be informed about those, and I really look forward to continuing this kind of conversation and working together in some important events in this year, like in a month or less than 2 months, we have the high-level political forum at the UN in New York. And then at the end of the year, of course, we have COP26 coming up, which is the flagship meeting on climate change policy and governance. So I hope that we will be able to, prepare some good engagement and move this agenda further, working together. I think, one of the key messages that comes out of this meeting and that we've heard before is really collaboration, multilateralism, and establishing, concrete avenues of working together and pushing this agenda further in a joint and holistic way. So I will stop here for now and thank all of you again for joining, and hope to see you again in the future.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you all of you. Stay in contact.
Thank you, everyone.
Very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.